Welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time. I'm Im, and today I'm going to talk about the 3 books I've read so far in January, starting with A Marvelous Light by Freya Marska. This is a historical fantasy. It's set in Edwardian England, which I think circa 1908, 1910, somewhere in there, based on some of the markers that are throughout the book. It is about Edwin Corsi, who is the youngest son of a magical family, but he himself doesn't have a lot of magic, or he's not very confident in his magic. It's one of I think it's a combination of things happening there. And Sir Robin Blythe, who is not at all magical, but gets dropped into this magical world by accident. Basically, he ends up, sorry if you can hear my son jumping around in his room, by the way. Robin, and there was a moment, there's a point in the book where I was really confused because sometimes he was being called Robert and sometimes he was being called Robin, because his dad's name is also Robert, or was, and then when his dad, Robin was the diminutive, so anyway, there was a moment, but I figured it out. But go in knowing that he might be called Sir Robert and Robin sometimes interchangeably. Robin gets put into a civil service position because the guy who had worked there disappeared, and they were like, we need to fill this vacancy. They give Robin the job. It turns out it's a magical liaison kind of thing, and Edwin is from the magical side and Robin is from the non-magical side, but it's kind of assumed that whoever works that job is aware of the magical society, I guess, the magical world, which Robin isn't until he gets this job, and it goes from there. It becomes this mystery of what happened to his predecessor, and it becomes a house party thing because he has to go with Edwin out to Edwin's family home to do some research. I'm not going to give any spoilers here, but just it's interesting. So the magic system is really interesting, but it's the system's not, maybe it is, but there's some misogyny involved. It's very blatant that women aren't educated in magic the way the men are. Women, kind of patted on the head. And then this older woman magician uses nature magic and is very powerful, and people are amazed by this because it's not the logical magic that the guys use, I guess. Magic is done through what they call cradling. It's you remember, I don't know if you remember, because my kids never did this, but if you're old enough, you remember the string games we used to play in grade school, where you'd take a string and you'd make all the different patterns in the string and have your friends stick their hand in there and then snap the string. Anyway, that's how they do the magic, and what happens is eventually, when you've learned it, you don't need the string anymore. You just do it with your hands, except Edwin feels the need to continue using his string. It's kind of his crutch. So that's part of it, and then he finds out he has an affinity for this nature magic, and that becomes a whole other thing. And because Edwin and Robin are gay, there's something, I'm not sure if it's intentional, but there's kind of this sense that, Edwin's affinity with the land and the earth is part of his effeminacy, I guess. I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I'm not sure how I feel about this misogyny that's being built. This ends up being the first in a series, so I don't know if that's something that's going to be explored or addressed throughout additional books. I started out wanting, this book for me started out as a 5-star, and then it kind of got chipped away just a little because at about the 60% mark, it grinds to a halt for a bunch of graphic sex. I call this book an Oreo. I'm like, it starts out with plot. There's a big middle section where it's just a lot of sex, and then kind of tapers off. I would say that the end, some of the twists were pretty evident to me early on, who the baddies were going to be. And then there's like characters like Maud, which is Robin's sister. She's kind of woefully underutilized, like to the point where I'm like, why is she even here? Again, I assume that in future books she will, you know, be a bigger part of what's going on. There's a secretary, Miss Morrissey, who is Indian and British, like, you know, she's a person of color, and she and her sister get kind of roped in, but again, they feel marginal for now. And then there's like, there are things that were just weird, like there's a guy named Lord Hawthorne, and again, you don't see a lot of him, you hear a lot spoken about him, and I liked him. I wanted more of him, which I assume, again, will happen in future books. But they say he's a baron, but that his father is an earl. And I'm like, I'm not super intimately familiar, but usually the son of an earl would be a viscount if he's using one of his father's courtesy titles, and if he's not the eldest son, and I don't remember if Hawthorne is or was, he wouldn't be using any of his father's courtesy titles, because only the eldest son does that. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, if I'm misremembering how it works, but I'm just like, why are you a baron if your dad's an earl? Because, like, Robin is a baronet, and everybody acts like, oh, Sir Robin is such a big deal, and I'm like, but a baronet's not that big a deal. You know, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's a title, but it's not like a title. I mean, you know, if he'd been anything more than a baronet even, like, I don't know. Anyway, they act like the Sir Robin, like, opens all these doors for him, and I'm like, really though? I don't think so. Overall, there's some great poetic language in this book, but by the time we got to the end, I was very close to being kind of tired of the characters, because we'd spent so much time in their heads, and I don't know, it wore me out being in their heads a little bit. So at the end of the day, I gave it a 4.6. I did really, overall, very much enjoy it. It's probably one of the best books I've read in a long time. And I will probably read the next book and just see where it goes. Oh, there was one other thing. There were times in the editing where I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if but there was a few times where they said she made a small face, and I was like, a small face? Like, what does that mean? And then I realized I think they meant like she, like, her expression changed slightly, or, you know, like, I feel like, I don't know, it was a weird thing, and it happened more than once, and I noticed it. Anyway, here I'm going to put one small potential spoiler. I will put the spoiler alert thing up here so you can fast forward, and if I remember, I'll also put a timestamp to skip to if you don't want to hear this one thing. I don't think it's a big deal, but for some people, if you want to go in not knowing anything, you know. This series has very much kind of a Harry Potter Deathly Hallows thing going on, because there are three the end result is there are three magical objects to track down before the bad guys get them first and use them in a bad way. So just know going in that that's kind of the overall plot. I don't know if you like that kind of thing, if it matters to you. That to me, like, that parallel was really kind of obvious once we realized what we were after, and what it's called the three contracts. The last contract had three. The magicians had a last contract with, like, the Fae, I guess, and the result was these three objects of power, kind of like the rings in Lord of the Rings, even, I guess, but anyway, they're bad magicians trying to get the items of power, because once you bring them together, you can do something, and now the good guys are scrambling to get them first before the bad guys use them in a bad way. So that is A Marvelous Light. Like I said, I gave it a 4.6 at the end of the day. I did really enjoy it overall, but like the way it grinds to a halt in the middle for just like all the sex, and then I mean it was I'm not a big, like, I don't particularly enjoy reading sex scenes or anything, but I could tolerate it. It was pretty graphic, but it didn't bother me. Though by the end of the book, every time there was a sex scene, I was skimming, because I was like, oh, this again. That if you really like that kind of thing, there's lots of it here. The ground to a halt for me, the book did, as we had to get through them, doing their thing and then getting back to the story. And so I deducted a little bit for that, a little bit for some of the other weird little things, but still a really good book. The next book I read was Love, Comment, Subscribe by Kathy Yardley, I want to say. This is a frenemies to lovers rom-com. Lily and Tobin have known each other since like grade school, and now they're 28 years old and they're both YouTubers. She's a beauty YouTuber. He does like game playthroughs and silly, goofy, prank type stuff. And so it doesn't seem like they have a lot in common, but they decide to collaborate to try and bring all of their numbers up, their subscribers. They're like, oh, let's do a crossover. They're 28 in this. Well, okay, so we see them a little bit in high school at age 18. Lily really wants to join the popular group. She's part of what's called the Nerd Herd, which Tobin is part of too, but she really wants to join the popular kids because it's not really clear why. It's sort of like she's tired of being looked down upon by these people when she wants to prove she's just as good. She could fit in with them if they just give her a chance, kind of thing. And then she gets rejected by them and retreats back into the Nerd Herd. But then once they go away to college, she kind of loses touch with everybody, focuses on her career. She's very ambitious and driven and, wants to be successful. It's back to needing to be popular, needing to prove that you can be just as cool as the cool kids, I guess. She starts out with like 3 million YouTube subscribers, and Tobin has a few more than her. And I'm just like, million? Because so we all know, look at my numbers. We all know I don't know anything about how to get subscribers on YouTube. By the way, subscribe if you will. I'm trying to get to just 100 by the end of the year, and then I'm going to do a giveaway if I get there and stay there for 30 days. So, but I'm like, the YouTubers that I follow that are really popular, even they don't always have more than like 1 million. So I'm like, I don't know. To me, it just felt a bit much to say, oh, 3 million isn't enough. What? Okay, but, again, I could be wrong. I don't know a whole lot about YouTube or whatever. The whole point, obviously, is that they have two very different styles and two very different, channels and how to make crossovers work. And it's also about Lily kind of getting back in touch with her high school friends. There's a high school reunion at one point. It's fine. It's a lot of, here are two people coming up with ideas to make YouTube videos, and the YouTube video that they make. They do like 6 different collaborations, and it's cute, I guess. I didn't really feel the tension chemistry between these two characters, but I'm not a big rom-com reader either. I feel like this was probably pretty standard for the genre. There were some editing issues, like, again, like, there's a ton of eye rolling. Everybody in this book rolls their eyes, and I'm like, again, I think that's something that's really common to the genre, maybe, where that's a really common, they rolled their eyes. But then, like, the dialogue tags were, like, people don't just say, ask, whisper, remind, like, they carp, it's just, there are all these, like, elaborate dialogue tags, and it just, like, noticeably, like, distract to the point of distracting, right? And then there are things like where they say they ate some food, they did this. I'm like, did you really need the food? Like, if you're not going to tell me exactly what they ate, you can just tell me they ate. I will assume what they ate was food. It's just the editor in me, like, the editor in me would have given this like a 1 star. But overall, I think for me it started at about a 3.8, 3.5. But then by the end of it, because it went on a little longer than it needed to, but because the editing and the dialogue tags and the stuff like that really started to irritate me, I ended up landing at a 2.75 for this one. It apparently is the first in a series. I hope they get a better editor for the next books. I don't know that I would pick up another one, but apparently, like, the high school friends in this group are gonna get their own, like, pair-off stories, from what I can tell. So that is love, comment, subscribe. Cute. Not my usual thing, so I'm probably being harsher on it than I should be for a rom-com, kind of read. I'm trying to read more outside my usual genres, see what I like and don't like, but, I feel like maybe for this genre, the level of editing is not as demanding or not as expected or something. But it was hard. It was hard for me because of that. Finally, the last book I've read so far is just the Etiquette Guide to Japan. It's by Tuttle. It was revised in 2015, so it's already maybe somewhat out of date because I think things change pretty rapidly in these things. The original and the revision. So, I assume that the original text is there, and then the reviser came and changed or fixed or added to. They're both American men, which I mean, if they've lived in America and then in Japan, I guess they're qualified to tell me all about Japanese culture, but I still feel like I would want to hear also from somebody from Japan. Like, maybe there could have been a collaboration between an American and a Japanese person who would explain the culture and things like that. I don't know. That's just me. It's a really readable book. It's pretty comprehensive, especially for business stuff. And I mean, it covers, like, etiquette for weddings and funerals and a tea ceremony and stuff like that. And again, all the businessy stuff. But I feel like it's geared mostly towards people who are going to go to Japan and stay there or live there for a length of time versus maybe touristy stuff. I also say that I'm already coming to this book with a certain amount of knowledge about the language and culture of Japan. The nice thing about the book is when they use Japanese terms, they do give like a little pronunciation guide, although I was reading the pronunciation guide and I was like, I'm not sure that's how I would like Romanize how to say that. Well, I mean, it's already Romanized, but like, I'm not sure that that's the way I would have broken that up to get the right pronunciation. So my understanding of Japanese might be a little different than theirs, or they might just have, when they were trying to decide, well, how do you explain how to say this to somebody in English, I just think I would have done it differently. That's just me. So I'm coming to it from a side of already, again, having a little bit of understanding of the culture and the language. So I don't know how useful or easy this book would be for a complete newbie to read and comprehend. I think it's pretty straightforward and all that, but like, I feel like if it didn't do things like, it didn't have how to order at a restaurant or something. Like I said, not the touristy stuff, more like the bigger kind of stuff. So I don't know. Overall, I mean, I still gave it like a 4.75. Like, for what it is, it's a really good book. It's a good, like, entrance book to, you know, overall Japanese culture and etiquette and what to do when you're there if you find yourself in these situations. Like, it's handy in that way. Yeah, that. Although nowadays I think most people would just watch a bunch of YouTube videos about it. Not, well, tangentially related, I will say, if you want to learn Japanese. And this is not sponsored or anything, but if you want to learn Japanese, I use Memrise and Tobira, which is a workbook. I've also used Japanese from Zero and Kanji from Zero, which is also good, but I'm really enjoying the Tobira system. So Memrise has been really good as a computer, you know, regular computer thing, and then I, for workbooks, use Tobira, which also has an online component where you can listen to the dialogues and stuff like that. I read this book because it was given to me for my birthday, and I meant to go to Japan in 2020. I had plane tickets and everything, and obviously couldn't go. Still hoping to go, still planning to go, just don't know when I'll be able to go. So hopefully, if not the end of this year, maybe next year, the year after. I just, yeah. In the meantime, I can read about it, I can learn the language, I can enjoy other facets of the culture, like the food. We do have really good Japanese food where I live, so that's a plus. Last night I literally had dreams about sushi, so, you know. Okay, so that's it. That's what I've read so far. I've just started Queerbaiting in Fandom. I'm still reading Keep Sharp, so a couple more nonfictions, and I've got The Ton of French, and I still have The Beautiful by Renee. I can't remember the last name, but I still have that lined up. And Absolute Boyfriend, the manga, is also sitting over here waiting for me to get into that. So at the end of the month, if I've read at least 3 more things, you'll get another wrap up. If not, we'll wait until next month. I don't want to do one for each book, just kind of collect them. It seems to work better for videos, and I will see you next time.